Hello and welcome to this presentation of ArcGIS API for JavaScript, Photoshop style graphics effects for your layers and data. I am Jan Keben, I am developer in the JavaScript API team, and I'm joined with Andrew Batsuk, who is a product engineer in the team. Over the last releases, we have been adding new graphical capabilities to the JavaScript API, and today we are going to cover the main ones. First, Andrew will talk about layer blend modes, and you will learn how you can control how layers are blended together and how you can create new unique visualizations. And then I will talk about layer and feature effects and how you can apply different types of very fancy effects like drop shadow and blur and bloom, and how you can really make your data pop. Please, Andrew, take over.
Hey you all, this is Andrew. In this section, I'm going to talk about layer blending. The blend modes are used to blend layers together to create an interesting effect or even produce what seems like a new layer or new map. When blending layers, the layer you're applying the blend mode to is referred as a top layer, and all the layers underneath the top layer are referred as background layers. We're blending the top layer with all the background layers to create different effects with just one line of code. Results of the blend mode will be completely different depending on the layers being blended together, even if you're applying the same blend mode to the same layer. So in this example here, we have two layers. The background or the base map layer is a rolled firefly tile layer, and then the top layer is the vintage shaded relief tile layer. Then we apply the color blend mode to the vintage shaded relief tile layer, and this is the result of this blend mode. You can see those two layers blended together, looks like a new map. But if we swap out the background layer, let's say with the mid-century vector tile layer, and use the same blend mode on the shaded relief layer, then this is how the result is going to look like. So as you can see from here, that the layers that participate in the blend mode will completely define the result of your blending. The blend mode is a stream property implemented on most layers. We have 31 blend modes for you to choose from, and the default blend mode is a normal blend mode where a layer is drawn over another layer, blocking the contents of the background layer where they overlap. The other blend modes can be grouped into 6 different categories depending on how similar they are. Okay, so we have lighten blend modes, darken, contrast, component, composite, and invert blend modes. So next few slides, we are going to take a look at all those blend modes that fall into those different categories. So first, lighten blend modes. The blend modes fall in this category create lighter results than all the layers involved. So when you use any of those blend modes in this category, in the result, the black color becomes transparent, white stays white, and any color that is lighter than black will become lighter all the way to the white. And of course, each lighten blend mode works a little differently as they have their own formulas. So modes in this category are useful when you want to lighten the dark colors in your map. So in this category, we have 5 blend modes, okay? So the first lighten blend mode, this mode simply compares the colors in the top and background layer and keeps the lighter color. And then the colors in the top layer will become transparent if they're darker than the overlapping colors in the background layer. So basically, this allows the background layer to show through the top layer. Lighter blend mode multiplies the colors in the top and also in the background layers by their layer and symbol opacities. Then the resulting colors are added together. In the plus blend mode, the colors of the top and background layers are simply added together. So color dodge blend mode divides the bottom layer by the inverted top layer. And this basically lightens the bottom layer depending on the value of the top layer. Brighter the top layer, more of its color is going to affect the bottom layer. Okay, so in this example here, we have a featured layer with an orange fill, and it's displayed over a dark hill shade layer. We're applying a color dodge blend mode to this orange layer, and as you can see here in the result, of this blend mode is affecting the look and feel of the bottom layer. The bottom layer is now lightened and has this orange tone. Okay. So next one is the darken blend mode category. So the blend modes in this category can be thought of as the opposite of the lightened blend modes. So the blend modes in this category will create darker results than all the layers involved. So in the result of the darken blend modes, the white color becomes transparent, black stays black, and any color that is darker than white is going to darken all the way to black. The blend modes in this category can be used to highlight shadows or labels or show contrast or accentuate an aspect in a map. So in this category, we have 3 blend modes. So first, the darken blend mode. So this blend mode retains the darker colors in the overlapping layers. So the colors in the top layer will become transparent if their color is lighter than the overlapping colors in the background layer, allowing the contents of the background layer to show through the top layer. Now, multiply blend mode just emphasizes the darkest parts of the overlapping layers by multiplying the colors of the top layer with the colors of the background layer. Now, the multiply and darken modes can be used to have dark labels of the base maps to show through the top layer, for example. Or the multiply blend mode can be useful when you want to have your elevation data showing through or peeking through the top layer. Now the color blend mode divides the inverted bottom layer by the top layer, then inverts the results again. So this will result in darkening the top layer by increasing the contrast to reflect the color of the bottom layer. Okay, so the darker the bottom layer, the more of its the color is going to be used in the blending. So basically, color burn is complete opposite of color dodge. So in this example here, you can see the first image in the upper left-hand side is showing a feature layer displayed over a vector tiles layer. But in the first example, you hardly see any labels peeking through the top layer. So I'm going to apply a multiplied blend mode to our top layer, and then all of a sudden you can see that all the dark labels from the base map is showing through the top layer. Just by adding this one line of a code, we completely change the look and feel of our map. So next, contrast blend modes. Contrast blend modes create contrast by both lightening the lighter areas and darkening the darker areas in the top layer by using lightening or darkening blend modes we talked about so far. The contrast blend modes will lighten the colors lighter than 50% gray and darken the colors darker than 50% gray, and 50% gray will become transparent in top layer. So the overlay blend mode makes its calculations based on the brightness of the background layer, while all the other contrast blend modes will make their calculations based on the brightness of the top layer. And contrast blend modes can be used to increase the contrast and saturations to have more vibrant colors in your layers. So first, overlay blend mode. This blend mode uses the combination of multiply and screen modes to darken or lighten the colors in the top layer, with the background layer always shining through the top layer. The result is the darker color values in the background layer intensify the top layer, while the lighter colors in the background layer will wash out the overlapping areas in the top layer. Soft blend mode applies a half-strength screen mode to lighten areas and half-strength multiply mode to darken areas of the top layer. The vivid light uses the combination of color burn or color dodge blend modes by increasing or decreasing the contrast depending on the colors of the top layer. So in the screenshot, we are showing how overlay blend mode can be used. In the first screenshot, you see the polygon geometry that we are moving around on the map has a gray fill. But we want to, if we just simply apply an overlay blend mode to this graphics layer, then all of a sudden you can see that the features of the bottom layer that overlaps this polygon became more vibrant, and it is easy to see those features are overlapping with this polygon circle. Also, the examples of the contrast blend mode include maybe you can duplicate the same layer and set the overlay blend mode on the top layer to increase the contrast and tones of your layer. You can also add a polygon layer with a white fill symbol over a dark imagery layer and apply soft light blend mode to increase the brightness of the imagery layer. Component blend modes use the primary color components, which are hue, saturation, and luminosity, to blend top and background layers. Okay? So hue blend mode creates an effect with a hue of the top layer and luminosity and saturation of the background layer. Saturation creates an effect with the saturation of the top layer, and while keeping the hue and luminosity from the background layer. Now, luminosity blend mode will create an effect with the luminosity of the top layer and the hue and saturation of the background layer. Color can be thought of as the opposite of luminosity because it uses the hue and saturation of the top layer and luminosity of the background layer. So in this screenshot here, we're showing the world topple layer on top of the world heel shade layer, and we are applying a luminosity blend mode to the topple layer. And as you can see here, the result is drastically different from the original map. And because we're applying the luminosity effect to the topple layer, we are preserving luminosity of the top layer, but preserving also hue saturation from the background layer. So with just one line of a code, we created a completely different looking map. Okay. The composite blend modes can be used to mask out the contents of the top or background or the buff layers using the contents from the other layer or buff layers. The modes that start with destination, they can be used to mask out the data of the top layer with the data of the background layer. There are a lot of destination layers. Their differences are subtle but important. So I'm not going to go through all of those composite blend modes because there are a lot of them. Instead, I'm going to suggest that you take a look at the SDK document on blend modes. And the SDK doc goes into in detail exactly how destination or source modes are masking out the data. Now, any blend modes that starts with source will block or mask out the data of the background layer using the data from the top layer. So, for example, in this screenshot here, we are showing feature and imagery layers on the left-hand side, right on their own, and in the order they're drawn in the view. The imagery layer contains the land cover classification rasters, and the feature layer contains the 2070 county crops data. Now, in the right image shows the result of the blend mode where the destination in blend mode was set on the imagery layer. Okay, so as you can see here, the effect is very different from the original layer again. Basically, the result, blended result shows the areas of cultivated crops only where both imagery and feature layers content overlap. So destination in blend mode can be used to show areas of focus, right? So such as this one, or maybe earthquakes or animal migration or point source pollution by revealing the underlying map and providing a bird's eye view of the phenomenon, for example. Last but not least, invert blend modes. So invert blend modes will allow you to invert or cancel out the colors depending on the colors of the background layer. So difference in exclusion blend modes, for example, could be used on two imagery layers that shows the forest coverage, and you could use it to visualize how the forest coverage changed from one year to another, because it will show the difference between the two imagery layers in this case. Invert blend mode can be used to turn any light base map into a dark base map with, again, one line of a code. So in the screenshot here, we have a light base map, and over it we have a green featured layer, and we are going to use the invert blend mode on the top layer, and then we have as a result, have a dark base map. Okay, so a few quick words on the blend mode tips. Order of the layers are very important in the results of the layer. Okay. Also, the layer opacity of the features and layers, visibility of the layers also will affect the result of the blend modes. By default, the very bottom layer in your map is drawn on a transparent background. Basically, your base map is drawn against a transparent background. If you want to apply effects on your base map, then you can change the map view's background color to the color you like, and you can set a blend mode on your base map. In that case, the effect will take place. If you are applying an effect against a transparent background, you won't see any difference, okay? So those are the things I want to point out. Next, I want to show you a couple of demos that take advantage of blend modes to change the look and feel of your maps. So in this application, we're displaying the submarine cables that were built since 1990. So as I play the time slider on the map, you can see the submarines that were built for the current time extent. So the main thing I want to concentrate for this application is how we used blend mode and effect properties to change the look and feel of this application. So first, I'm going to turn off the blend modes that are applied to all the layers that's displayed in this application. So if I turn off the blend modes, this is how the base map looks like. So you can see by applying the blend mode, we completely change the look and feel of this application. And then also we've applied the effects on the ocean's labels. So as you can see, if I turn off the effects, then the labels are really hard to read against the dark background, right? So we apply the blend mode on the layers that are participating in a base map of this view. So here is how we are adding the base maps. We're adding the firefly imagery, then the vector tile layer, then the rolled ocean reference map image layer. Okay. Since we create a new instance of a new tile layer that references the firefly rolled imagery, then we are applying a luminosity blend mode to this layer. But remember, we are adding the tile layer at the very bottom of our base maps. So this base tile imagery is being drawn against a transparent background. If I apply a blend mode against a transparent background, then the blend mode will not have effect. But to apply an effect to this layer, we can set a background color for our map view, which we're doing here. I'm setting the background color to this dark navy color, and I'm setting the luminosity blend mode on this tile layer. So remember, the luminosity blend mode uses the luminosity of the top layer and uses the saturation and hue from the bottom layer. In this case, it's the background color. Then we're adding a new vector tile layer. We're applying a soft light blend mode, and soft light blend mode either will darken or lighten the areas of the top layer using either screen or multiply modes. Then we are creating the map image layer, which references the ocean labels. Then we are setting a hard light blend mode on this imagery layer. So hard light mode will increase the contrast of the labels in this case, right, to display over the dark background. So hard light also applies either screen or multiply blend modes, either to darken or lighten the top layer. And also we are using the effect property on this layer. For that matter, we're also applying effects on the submarine cables layer. And Jan is going to talk about effects just in a bit, so I will defer this to him. Because we are applying both effect and blend modes, I want to point out if you apply both effect and blend mode to a layer, then effect will be applied first, then the blend mode gets applied to the layer after effect is applied. Okay, so next, map of Romania. This map of Romania was created by our coworker Raluca Nicole, and we can all appreciate that this map has a really nice old look feel to it, and it has a really beautiful cartography. It's a beautiful map. So let's take a look at how Raluca created this map. So she started out with this map. Okay, so as you can see, this map is not very exciting. It just has a white background with a few labels and a border of Romania. And then she transformed that map to this map by just applying blend modes and effects to the layers that she's adding to this application. So she adds a lot of layers to this application. She's adding hillshade layer, which is the elevation information that's peeking through the top layers. Then she adds the Romania layer, which has this brown pattern image. Then adds the country borders, the grids, then the cities, region borders, then region names, sea layer, then a graphics layer, right? So let's take a look at all the layers that has a blend mode applied to. So first one is Romania pattern layer, this dark brown layer. As you can see, she's applying a multiply blend mode. Remember, the multiply blend mode will darken the top layer, and if you have an elevation layer in this case, it will let the elevation layer to peek through the top layer. So then next she's applying another blend mode to the graphics layer. This graphics layer has a white fill that represents the extent for the boundary of Romania. So she's setting also multiply blend mode on this layer to let the elevation to peek through. And she's also applying a multiply blend mode on a C layer. And also you notice that she was applying also drop shadow effects to her layers. Okay. If you haven't worked with blend mode can be confusing. So I set up a simple web map that you can use in the Map Viewer beta. If you have time, please check out this web map in the Map Viewer beta and play around with blend modes. And this concludes the blend mode section. Next, Jan is going to talk about effects. Jan?
Thank you, Angel. That was great. Now let's move on to layer and feature effects. I'm gonna first talk about layer effects. So layer effects are various filter functions that can be performed on a layer to achieve different visual effects, like you can find in a photo editing app, like Photoshop, GIMP, Illustrator, Inkscape, and so on. Those layer effects are available on all the layers that are supported in 2D map views. So it's not just feature layers, it's also imagery layer, tile layer, OpenStreetMap layer, all the layers that can be drawn in 2D. The way it works is that instead of the layer draws its content and then goes into blending, like Angel described. With layer effects, between those two steps, we draw different effects. We apply different effects to what the layer has drawn. So first the layer draws its content on a WebGL surface that we call, the technical term is a frame buffer object. It's an object in which the layer draws. And then this frame buffer object goes into a succession of effects, filter functions if you want. So for example, blur, and then contrast, and then, I don't know, saturation. Then when this is done, the result is blended with the other layers like Angel talked about. So the layer effects, the syntax is completely inspired by the CSS filters, right? So I'm sorry about the name, but effect, and in CSS it's going to be called filter, because we already use a filter for feature filtering and data filtering at large. But so yeah, an effect is defined after the CSS specification for filters. And so if you are familiar with CSS filter, you are already proficient with layer filters because it's exactly working the same way. And if you look on the MDN, you can find everything that there is to know about filters. So the format of a filter of an effect is a string that describes a list of filter functions with their parameters. And then, so here I have an example. For example, I define a layer effect by setting a string, and I will apply here 3 different filters. First, it's going to be contrast at 200%, then blur at 5 pixels, and then a drop shadow. You will find typically the unit of the parameters will typically be percentage, absolute length, so it's going to be a pixel or millimeters, whatever you want, and then colors otherwise. Finally, the available filter functions are all the ones that you can find in CSS filter, just the URL one. If you're familiar with CSS filter, URL is not supported. And we also added bloom, which does not exist in CSS. So yeah, let's go and explore the different effect available to you. So I built this application called Effects Explorer that lets us play around with the different effects. You will have access to the source code and the application links in the slides. So in this application we have on the left side here all the effects that are categorized. So first we have the image correction effects. So we have brightness, contrast, and saturation. And you see, by just tweaking a little bit the effect, this is the actual effect that is applied on the layer. So brightness 160%, contrast at 63%, and saturation at 100%. And you can see that, with just by changing a little bit the effect, we really get a new map, and we don't have to recook this entire dataset. We can just like apply this on the fly. Next, we have the color filters. So these are, filters that you can find on very classic ones like sepia, grayscale. So let's remove sepia here. Grayscale to change your data in gray. That could be really nice if you have like color data on top of it. Really makes them pop. And then we have U-rotate. U-rotate lets you rotate the wheel of the colors for each pixel. So let's say if a pixel is green, if I rotate the U 180 degree, I will get red, and vice versa. It's a bit a particular filter. But here we have invert. So this is the Nova vector tile-based map. And if I can invert, and now I will get, something light, so invert, and then I can rotate the U to completely change the map. This is crazy. So now I have this, instead of having this dark base map, now I have this light base map. And this is a trick that was given to me by John Nelson, a cartographer at Esri, and he said, yeah, if you invert and then you rotate by 180 degrees, you can transform any base map in a dark base map, in a light base map, and vice versa. That's great. I have another example that showcases that later on. Then here we have the blur filter. So blur is very interesting if you need to de-emphasize some layer who is getting in the way. So here, it's a nice base map, but maybe we are not so much interested into looking at the topology. So we can maybe remove the hillshade or de-emphasize a little bit the hillshade by applying a blur. So here on the hillshade layer, I just apply a 5 pixel blur, and then you can now, like, the labels really are more visible. Then we have drop shadow. So drop shadow is a layer, is an effect to apply a drop shadow to a layer. So I have the world hillshade layer here in the background, and then I have a feature layer with just friends. So now I can apply a drop shadow that will be applied just on that feature layer. Right? So you can, like I explained earlier, the layer, the feature layer of friends is drawn, then this image is, there is a filter applied, and the two, everything is blended together and then blended with the other layers. So the drop shadow, you can control the offset X and Y, like really much like CSS, and the blur radius, as well as the color. And this is the syntax, super easy. And then the bloom filter. The bloom filter is great to make some features shine. So the way it works is a bit abstract. You have to get your, you have to play with it and to fully understand how it works. But basically, it makes features that have a color above a certain threshold shine. Right? So here, what I want to do is I want to make the features in bright blue shine. So I know that this color, because I built this map, I know that this color has a luminosity of 65, right? So first I'm gonna put some blue, right? So if let's say I put like a 2.5 blue, you can see like now all the feature shine, and it's a bit overwhelming. So now I can control the threshold to say, okay, I want all the features that are above like 64% luminosity, 65 to shine, and now all those features shine, but not the others, right? So you can, the threshold here is the luminosity of the color. Nice. So let me share an anecdote to use it as a segue to my next point. But when we finished working on the layer effects, we were ready for 4.17, so a release earlier. We gave that feature to cartographers at Esri, and they played with it and gave us some feedback. So first they were like super exciting. I mean, drop shadow, blur, it's amazing. Like you can do a lot of stuff. And then the second feedback we got was, I want to change the effect at different scales. And then we were like this, because we had to do a lot of work to actually adapt it to make it scale dependent, but it works. So we can define the layer effects to be different at different scales. So like that, when the user zooms in and out, we can tweak the parameters of these different effects. So the format is an array of objects with a scale and an effect value, and the effect list must be compatible between scales. Okay, so here I have the way you would set up your layer effect. You will define an array of objects, and then each object has a scale value, so scale 1/80,000 and 20,000, and then two effect values. So here I have opacity 50% and bloom with those parameters. This is not working, right? It's not possible for me when I zoom in to interpolate between opacity and bloom. I need to be able to continuously transition between one scale to the other. So the proper way to fix that is to set the same effect values on each scales, but with the different parameters. So here I can see that between the two scales, I will transition the bloom from 0 to 1, and then I will transition the opacity from 50% to 100%. Another way that is compatible is just to omit, each effect. So the default opacity is 1, right? So if I don't say opacity, and if I don't mention opacity 100%, I can just remove it. And this I can also interpolate. And the reason is because the order of the operations matter. One effect is applied after another. So here I don't know if I need to say opacity then bloom or bloom then opacity. So that's why you have to be explicit as a developer and say exactly the way they are supposed to be ordered. So yeah, let's take a look at this same demo that I just did, but with scale dependency. Okay, so in this application, I have the same map of New York with the bloom filter applied. So here we can really see the problems with bloom is that as I zoom in, it gets really distracting when it's applied on features. This is maybe not what I want. So what I would prefer is maybe to have the regular colors, no bloom applied at this at large scale. So yeah, so here I have the two scales set up. Like here, this is the generated code. And as I zoom in, I can maybe change the intensity to be 0. And then you can see as I zoom in now, the bloom fades, right? So each component is interpolated individually. the intensity will be interpolated between 2 and 0, but I can also interpolate maybe the threshold. So let's say let's put more blur and also a lower threshold, so more features will shine. So at this scale, you know, it's a Christmas tree, and then as I zoom in, maybe I will you know, put the threshold at 65 or 76, and you can see that as I zoom in, you know, less feature can shine now because the threshold is higher, and by the end of the zoom, no feature shines because the intensity is 0. Okay, let's move on now to feature effects. So the feature effect allows for the selection of features via a feature filter, and an included effect and excluded effect are applied to those features that respectively pass or fail the feature requirements. So filter is like a query, you know, it's like a where clause or a time filter or a geometry filter. And then, so this feature effect is available on all the feature layer views in 2D, right? So it's not applied on the layer, it's applied on the layer view. So you have the feature layer view as effect, we have GeoJSON layer view, CSV layer view, stream layer view. Okay, so how does that work? You remember this drawing that I showed at the beginning where the layer draws its content on a frame buffer object? Well, when you have feature effect applied on the layer view, this is what happens. You have the features that are going to be drawn. They are going to be, the filter will decide if a feature is in the bucket of the features that are included or in the bucket that the features are excluded. And then for each of the two buckets, they go through the same effect pipeline that we have for a layer effect, and then this goes into the layer content. Then this content continues, so you can have a layer effect applied, and then finally it goes into the blending. So there is a lot of steps into the rendering pipeline of the JavaScript API, but yeah, this is kind of a synthesized view of it. Right. So I put also a timeline to see a little bit where and when this was released. So in 4.8 we released this client-side query engine, so you can do query features on the layer view, on the data that is displayed on the screen. And then when we had this feature, we were left with, you know, we still had to be able to show and hide features. Right? It wasn't possible at that time to show and hide specific features on the screen. And so because we have this query engine that was able to do where clause and object ID queries, we decided to create this sort of feature filter. That, you know, if a feature passes the filter, then it's displayed. If it doesn't pass the filter, it's hidden. So it's binary, it's visible or not visible. And then came the idea of, okay, instead of show and hide, maybe we want to apply an effect on these features, so maybe make them a little bit more transparent, or maybe blur them and so on. So we couldn't implement blur at the time, but we implemented a lot of these effects. And then blend mode was released in 4.16, and in 4.18 we released layer effect, and we also revamped the feature effect, the way it's drawn. Now the two buckets are drawn separately. Before it wasn't like that. So the features that were drawn on top of each other, if they were transparent, they didn't look good and so on. Now it's great. Yeah. So let's go straight into a demo. So here we have this feature effect demo. This map shows all the precincts of the US for the election of 28. And here I have a slider that modifies a filter. So you can see the filter here says that all the features that have this percent gap property above 49% and below 51%, they will be passing the filter, and the other ones won't be passing the filter. So all the features that pass, they have a drop shadow applied. You can see this, and all the features that don't pass, they are grayscale 25%, so a little bit grayer, a little bit more blurry, and also a little bit more transparent. So this gives this very nice effect where you have like some of the features really pop while the other ones are de-emphasized. So you can also notice that all the features that are not passing the filter, so all the excluded features are drawn first in the first pass, and in the second pass we have the included features. Of course it works with scale dependency, why not? So it was included for free since we revamped the support, we merged the layer effect and the feature effect. And so, yeah, now you can define an excluded effect, for example, at different scales. So I did that because maybe at this scale, everything blurry is nice, but I wanted to have sharper features when I zoomed in. So you can see now that at this scale, the features are still very transparent, but that are excluded, very transparent, but they are sharp, no more blur. Yes, scale dependency, and finally some tips to find the right bloom threshold. Use the luminosity component in the color in HSL, right? So here I have a color picker, and I have this cyan blue color that I showed you the features were in. If I switch to display the color components in HSL, you can see that it's 65%. So that match this visualization where I could change the threshold. Then I have a demo to show you that the filter, the order of the filters in the list matters, right? So here I have a layer where I apply the drop shadow effect filter, and then I apply the opacity filter. But now let's say I did opacity, then drop shadow. You can see that I get a completely different result, and just by changing the order. And the reason is that when it's transparent, then the drop shadow will show behind, right? But if it's opaque, then you have the drop shadow just around, and then after you can make it more transparent. Finally, you have to know layer effects are not supported in 3D. They are also not supported in print and legend. It's only client-side happening in the web browser. Okay, so I have a few more demos to finish. This is a demo of from the Living Atlas that shows the wildfires activities. So you can see here that we have like a smoke layer that has applied an invert. Instead of being gray, it's a bit bluish, and also it has a blur filter applied. I have this demo that to showcase what I was talking about earlier, that you can invert and you rotate any base map and you will get a different map. Look at this, it's great. This one is really nice. The mid-century one is pretty nice as well. This is the original, this is the inverted. Nova is pretty cool as well. Yeah, so feel free to explore. Just you rotate and invert, and you will get a coherent map, just slightly different. And then finally, one nice trick also is that you can, I said that layer effects can be applied on all types of layers, including imagery. So here I have this traditional land cover layer on the left. And then what I did is I changed the unique value, I assigned a unique value renderer to only renders the pixel where you can see cities basically at different densities. I applied some sort of reddish yellow hue to it, and then I applied an effect to apply bloom at small scale, and then as I zoom in, you can see that you know, it's the bloom disappears, and then I have a nice, you know, grayscale a little bit. So that's really nice. You can see that you can really tweak the rendering of you know, any layers by using the symbology, a combination of the symbology and effects. All right. And this concludes our presentation on layer effects and layer blending. I hope that you have a very good idea now of all the capabilities, like graphic capabilities of the JavaScript API. Please provide your feedback for this session by clicking on the session video survey link below, directly below the video. Thank you very much. Hi, welcome to our Q&A about this session about blend modes and filters. There was a lot of information. Those new features are quite daunting, but it's very addicting to play with them and also you know, discover how you can tweak your maps using those different techniques that we stole from graphic software applications. I'm joined with Andrew, who is a product engineer. She worked on blend mode and layer effects with us. So that was, yeah. We have 3 questions. Don't you know, if you have more questions, don't hesitate to add them in. The first one is, can you toggle some of those effects on like drop shadow and hover? So I'm gonna share my screen. This one. So while the presentation was playing, and when I saw the question, I built an example on top of this one, which is access features with pointer event. The sample just highlight features when you mouse over. So it does every time the mouse move, we do a hit test, and then if we get object IDs, we highlight those object IDs. So I modified this sample to, instead of doing highlight, well, I changed the base map and the color, but just because a drop shadow on top of a dark base map is not gonna be very nice. So I used a light base map and a red symbology. And what I changed is that instead of doing layer view highlight, I just changed it to use layer view effect. So I defined a filter and I said that I want to include all the object IDs that I hit test, and then I will apply an included effect. It doesn't work great because layer effects and feature effects, they are animated. So when you apply them, there is some sort of a transition. But it kind of, you know, we will need, I just did that in 2 minutes. We will need to try it more, but you know, you can do it. It does work, but the animation is a bit complicated there. Let's see. So I'm gonna share the link to this in as a reply. Okay. So can you save the result of blend mode to be used in other applications that don't use the JavaScript API? So we first implemented the blend mode as part of the JavaScript API. Then we put it inside the web app spec. So you can use the map viewer to change the blend mode and then share it. That map, if you share it with any other apps that uses the JavaScript API 4, they will honor that blend mode. But then ArcGIS Pro added blend mode support in Pro 2.7, 2.7. So it's called layer blending. So I Googled, you know, blend mode ArcGIS Pro, and then you have layer blending with a lot of the blend modes that we have in the web map. Just the compositing one are not supported. The one where you can set the destination, how, you know, which layer actually the source in, source out, destination in and out blend modes. But all the other ones are supported. I don't think the print task supports yet blend mode, so it's all client side and like effects as well. There is also a video from John Nelson to how to use blend modes in ArcGIS Pro. I'm gonna share those links as well in reply. And then this one. Okay, so next question is about. You can take some questions as well, Andrew, if you want. The next question is about if the source code is available. Yeah, so I also added the links as reply. So both my demos and Andrew's demos are on GitHub, and you can reuse them. So the links are in reply, and they will be also accessible in the slides later. Is it recommended to use bloom effect on dark base map only? No, you can use bloom. You can use bloom on any over any base maps, but the bloom is applied on the color that pass that threshold, right? That you define. So by default, if you have no threshold, it's gonna be 0. So all the colors will bloom. But if you change the threshold, it's going to be higher luminosity. So it's going to be the brightest colors that will bloom, which kind of demos better on dark base maps. That's why we use the dark base maps. But no, it can work on any base maps. I think we have some when we prototyped, we used like a fire symbol, and it was we bloomed that. I don't know if we have the sample on Android somewhere. This example with the fire symbols that we.
Yes, let me get it.
And so this one was over a light base map. So great presentation, thank you. I think you showed a demo with an invert drop shadow. An invert drop shadow. No, there is no invert drop shadow in the demos I have, but if you, I'm not sure I see which one you. Oh, maybe it's this one, the order. So the drop shadow is applied on, what happens here is that the drop shadow applies on the shape, and if that shape is transparent, you are going to see the drop shadow behind the shape. So, so this is the demo I showed with that. It's just to show that the order of how you apply the effect matters. If you apply a drop shadow here, I apply a drop shadow and I apply an opacity effect, which is kind of the opacity on the layer. Then you can see that you see the hillshade layer behind. But if I first make the layer a bit more transparent and then I apply the drop shadow, now the drop shadow is is visible under the shape. So yeah, so it's you have to imagine it's like a pipeline. You have the image, you apply the effect, then the result is going into the next effect, and so on. It's like a chain. So if the image is transparent, you apply the drop shadow, you see the drop shadow behind. Any plans to support any transform functions such as translate, scale, rotate? So that's for the, I guess, the effect. Yes, it's. I mean, we don't have plan to support it, but we thought of it, especially. Yeah, it's really convenient if you can do a mouse over, or just like based on an effect, based on a filter, being able to increase the size. It wouldn't be an effect per se because it's not part of the CSS specification that we followed, but we could introduce that as a separate property. So we could have effect, for features, and then eventually like geographic effects that you could apply temporarily, yeah, to highlight some features or make them bigger. Yeah, we thought about it. It's just like we don't have the resource right now for this one. Can we have an app with no base map, but just the country border? Do you want to take this one, Andrew?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's possible, quite possible. You don't have to have a base map. You can use your country border layer as a base map, or you can directly add it to the map. I am looking for samples, how it's done, but basically you can just create the layer, whether it's a feature layer or map imagery layer. Then you can add that layer as a base map to your map view, or you can just directly add it to the map and work with it. Let me see if I can find a sample that shows you that, and we'll post the link here.
Actually, there is, I remember, there is the one with the composite map views.
Oh, there you go. All right, so he found one. Okay.
So if you look in the SDK for composite map view, this is an app that displays the same map multiple times, but the map just has one layer, which is the US counties. Yeah, you can have a map without anything else, for sure.
There's one more question, Jan. Will these effects eventually be supported by print widget or printing?
Not for now.
That same goes for the blend modes too. There's no current plans. Oh. Yeah, this last question is, I know it's unlikely, but any chance these will be integrated into 3x API? And you know the answer already. Unfortunately, the answer is going to be no.
Yeah, we take heavily advantage of WebGL to achieve those effects, and we can't port the full WebGL rendering to 3x. So unfortunately, we can't. Yeah, we can't backport those features. So how do you bring Alaska and Hawaii into a same view?
Sample.
So yeah, so that sample is actually. Oops, sorry, I make it bigger. Okay.
Can you just post the sample?
Yes, I will post the sample. So in 4x, the API, the map and the map view are separated. So one map view can show a map, and a map can have multiple map views. So here we have one map with one layer, and let's go to the code. So we have our feature layer here, and then we create the map with that one feature layer. And then after we can create multiple map views. So we have the main map view, and then we define an extent. We specify the special reference. And then we can create the Alaska map view, the map view for Alaska, and then define another special reference. So it's the same map, different that we visualize in two different map views, three different map views with three different special reference. And this one is more adapted to visualizing Alaska. And then the last one is, of course, Hawaii. For Hawaii, I thought for Hawaii I added some rotation, but apparently not. Yeah, you can rotate different extents, different special reference. So if you change the renderer on that feature layer, it will update in all the map views.
Okay.
Right. That concludes, I think, our Q&A. Thank you for joining. If you have more questions, I think Ask the Expert is almost closed. And but yeah, you can send us an email, ask us on GeoNet. I am on Twitter at Jan Caven on Twitter. Yeah, I would be super happy also to see like if you are using those effects and blend modes and create some interesting visuals. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good day.